Hey, hi, my name is MarcusSalazar. Today's date is Friday, April 12th, 2019.
Hello, Marcus. Thank you for letting me interview you regarding Erickson's psychosocial stages of development. The purpose of this interview is for you to demonstrate your understanding of the theory and how the theory applies to you and students you currently teach or plan to teach. Question number one is, imagine I have never heard of Erickson's theory of psychosocial development. Briefly explain salient features of Erickson's theory of psychosocial development. What is the source of this information?
Okay, so first and foremost, my information comes from Robert Slavin's text, The Educational Psychology, Theory and Practice, and I got some information as well from Lumen Learning site. Eric Erickson was a stage theorist, formulated stages of psychosocial development, and from his personal fact-finding and understudy of the renowned Sigmund Freud, he developed a stage theory of our psychosocial development. Now, I want to point this out that he had no formal training as a psychologist, but nonetheless, after all these years of undertaking under Sigmund Freud, he still was sufficiently as trained as a psychoanalyst. Now, his 8 stages, I'm going to go through them and list like a quick detail. So stage 1 was trust versus mistrust, which stems from birth to 18 months. Now, this develops the essential trustfulness with a parent or caregiver with the child. So this is an example would be when he's receiving food. Stage 2, autonomy versus doubt, stems from 18 months to 3 years. Now this is where the child is doing things themselves and is trusted upon doing these things, like for example going out and playing on the playground without maybe possibly being watched, or the thinking he is not. So stage 3 is initiative versus guilt, which stems from 3 to 6 years. Letting them play alone, as a parent, you're letting them find their natural urges. And you don't, what I've noticed about Erickson is that or in the specific text of Slavin, he points out possibly a thing to be wary about. Now, in this particular stage 3, he's talking about wary of punishment to not make the child feel too guilty and have that particular memory stand out, because then it can develop into something negative. Stage 4, industry versus inferiority, is age years from 6 to 12. Now these are where kids are feeling more emotions when it comes to succeeding and failing. They're learning how that feels, how they deal with them, and how they're particularly measuring themselves. So this could be from a role model such as their parent, their sibling, a teacher, a mentor, people like that in their lives, where they're able to kind of figure out their emotions and how they make them feel. So it's really rewarding for them in that particular stage. And the following stage is identity versus role confusion, which stems from the ages of 12 to 18 years. They're asking themselves, of course, who am I right now? And this is a stage in adolescence where they're going through a plethora of things. They take more solace in their peers and their parents, and they're going through stages of maturation such as puberty. There's a lot of rapid change, and of course the who am I aspect is the questioning of oneself that really sticks out in stage 5. So this obviously also involves a lot of testing, experimentation, socially and sexually. They develop their egos, which is their basic alignment going into young adulthood. So they're barely forming how to learn how to be adults, young adults. And which brings us to the next stage, which is intimacy versus isolation. Once they learn their basic drives from the prior stage, they kind of are aligned and are now ready to be with a significant other. This is where they may feel they need to retreat if one is not ready for that particular stage. Now, I'm going to answer this question already. I know that I'm in this particular stage because I am with a significant other. I have a fiance, and whoever fails, I would say, just for example, myself, in terms of conflict, I would resort to isolation. It's just not, it's a comfort for me. It's not like therapeutic or anything. It's just, there's a comfort level where I'm able to just kind of self-reflect and be on my own. It's just, so I agree with Eric Erickson in this stage, particularly. The next stage, stage 7, generativity versus self-absorption, is middle adulthood. Guiding the next generation is what he talks about, Eric Erickson talks about, which usually means having a kid or in some cases he talks about a teacher teaching for a long period of time, and he also talks about if this stage is not particularly mastered, it may also lead into negative behaviors. And he delves. I'm sure there's a lot of delving into negative. If this stage is not mastered, then there is a negative result. But I remember that one being a highlight point for me. Stage 8, integrity versus despair, late adulthood. This is basically the final reflection where you try to resolve one poignant identity crisis and you're coming to terms with your own life and the ultimate end. So that.
Since you already answered question number 2, explain how being at this stage of development may influence your behavior and outlook in your classroom. On what do you base this explanation?
Well, my behavior in the classroom as a young adult, I'm energetic and positive constantly. And I try to carry that charismatic personality from home and into the classroom. Obviously, I'm more professional when I get into the classroom. And, you know, me and my significant other, we're positive towards each other. We're both teachers. We're both very supportive. And we try to resolve issues just as that way we would resolve with our kids. We're very basic and simplistic. I think that's how the way we should attend things. And I feel like if we were to treat people like how we want to be treated, I feel like that works well, not just with adults, but also children.
Identify at what level your students are or likely to be at in Erikson stages.
Well, with me being a single subject, I have both stage 4 and 5. I have some kids who are beginning to learn how success and failures develop. I'm also seeing kids that, again, are at stage 4 where they're measuring themselves, and also stage 5 where they're starting to question, who am I? You know, they have themselves, they're starting to shape themselves, starting to test the waters both socially and sexually, and they're going through a lot of things such as puberty. So I feel like I'd be prepared for that, knowing this information.
Explain how being at this stage of development may influence their behavior and outlook in your classroom. On what do you base this explanation?
Well, yeah, it's adolescence. These phases, they're going through a lot, so they're going to obviously have erratic behaviors in middle school and high school possibly. So, and this is not even including home neglect, social emotional trauma, and, you know, peer dynamics, which is what they're actually focused on more than parents, according to Erikson. And I would agree with that. So with me having a year of experience mentoring and tutoring at a middle school and working in elementary school now, I feel like I'd be prepared to deal with these conflicts, erratic behaviors. Of course, I'm going to always have these moments of understanding, and I feel like with my patience and my positivity, I'd be able to overcome that.
What might be some disconnects between you and your students, keeping the differences in the two stages in mind?
I'm a very understanding individual, so I don't feel like there'd be a particular disconnect. Obviously, I'm going to run into issues, but I feel like just constantly reminding them, being firm, and going over our roles and expectations, as well as the schools, and just being a constant reminder will be a huge benefit. I feel we can only do so much as teachers, and we also have to have that buy-in from parents at home to actually have that healthy cycle from home to school. And I think that stems from me with that. I got to develop those relationships with not only the student, but also the parent.
Do you have any final comments?
After reflecting on this whole project this developmental theory, I feel like I could have learned a lot from this as a student. So implementing this in my class will be a definite for sure, because I feel like students can learn from this and use this to possibly cope better with what they're going through, because it's quite normal. And putting them and showing them this is a normal situation for many of them, I feel like they'll have more of an understanding, as well as they'll feel more comfortable. Like this is something that everybody's going through, as well as I can have support from my teacher, which would be me, or other supports on campus, such as counselors and psychiatrists. So I feel like this would be something I would implement in my classroom.
Thank you.
Thank you.